Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited today because today I'm going to introduce you to the pastoral conversation. Guys, this is the conversation that I use day in and day out in my hospital. But like I said before, the elements of the pastoral conversation you can use in any relationship. It doesn't matter whether it's professional or personal, it's going to just be a massive benefit. But in order to understand how different the pastoral conversation is from what you're used to doing, I'm going to show you what you've been used to doing, which is you've been engaging in what I would call a social conversation. Now, I want to just quickly go through the elements of the social conversation to again make it very clear and distinct from the pastoral conversation. Okay, so first off, the nature of a social conversation is light. I typically like it to be entertaining and humorous, funny, that sort of thing. It's a conversation in which I'm going to ask lots of questions and I'm going to be very curious. I want to know what's been happening in your life. Okay. It's going to be a conversation in which we can share experiences. If you tell me you've just got back from Europe and your standout city was Venice, I want to know why. I want to know why that over Rome or Paris. I want to hear all about that. And then when we finished exploring that for you, I might share that my favorite city was Barcelona and I might talk about the nightlife or the vibe of the place, the energy, but we're going to share those sort of experiences together. In a social conversation, we may feel it's fine to offer advice or suggestions if we hear there are problems in someone's life or challenges. And it's certainly a conversation where I'm going to offer my platitudes or my silver linings. I mean, let's say I'm speaking with a friend, and just near the end of the conversation, they say to me, "Oh, by the way, Jenny just lost her job." And it's a little bit scary because with the cost of living going up, being reduced to one wage, I'm not sure how we're going to manage. Now, because I've been trained how to make people feel better in our society, I'm going to offer him a platitude or a silver lining, and it's going to go something like this. "Oh, don't worry about that, mate. Jenny's a smart girl. I bet you she'll find a job real soon. In fact, the same thing happened to my Carol, but she got a better job with more money. So this might actually be a blessing in disguise." You see, and that's a conversation I can walk away from thinking, you've done it again, champion. You've picked someone up in their low spot. You've made them feel better, and more importantly, made myself feel better. Okay. So, also in a social conversation, depending on your relationship, you might feel it's quite okay to argue or debate about sport or politics or even religion. So, again, guys, these are really the mountain peaks of the social conversation. It's very different from the pastoral conversation, which I'm going to go through now. So, the nature of a pastoral conversation is usually darker, heavier, more meaningful, full of emotion. In a pastoral conversation, I don't ask any questions. I contain my curiosity. In a pastoral conversation, I don't share experiences at all. The focus is not split between the two of us. The time's not shared. The focus is on the other person. So I don't share my experiences. I keep them to myself. Now, that's not to say that I can't draw on experiences I've had, but I don't share them because I want the focus to remain on the person I'm with. Okay. In a pastoral conversation, we don't offer advice. We don't offer suggestions. There's no fixes. There's no solutions. We don't do any of that. There's no silver linings. There's no platitude. You contain all of that. And remember, in a pastoral conversation, we never argue. We're not arguing with anyone's theology or their politics or anything like that if that comes up. In a pastoral conversation, my goal is to listen and to convey to the other person that I understand or I'm striving to understand what the impact of their loss is. And I convey that whether by the words that I use, the expressions on my face, or even sounds. Like sometimes just to go, "Oh my goodness." That conveys to the other person that I'm listening and that I'm trying to understand or I'm understanding where they're at. Sounds simple, right? contain all the other elements of the social conversation, and just listen and understand where the other person is coming from. Listen, guys, it is simple, but it's very difficult to do in practice. In fact, for me, the hardest thing about the pastoral conversation was containing my questions. You see, to me, I always thought when I ask questions, I demonstrate that I'm interested in your story, and it helped me gain more information, more knowledge to understand even better where you were coming from. What I didn't realize was that asking questions in a pastoral conversation, it destroys the connection. You see, all of this training is designed to enter into someone's world. I approach someone in such a way that they invite me into their world. And the image I want you to have in your head is that this person is in a pit. They're in a dark place. They're in a crisis. And I approach them in such a way that I want them to invite me into their pit. So trust me, in a social conversation, in certain counseling settings, asking questions is fine. What I'm talking about is when someone has invited me into their pit, I don't ask any more questions. And like I said, I really struggled with that. But because I was taught from day one to start writing verbatims, verbatims are an actual record of a conversation. I said, he said, I said, he said. It's a record of a conversation. Because I did that from day one and I could reflect on my practice, I could see that asking questions was a major barrier to staying in the pit with somebody. You see, what I noticed from my verbatims was this. When I asked questions, it was typically because I was either uncomfortable with what I was hearing. Someone was sharing something deep and meaningful, and I was uncomfortable. I didn't know how to respond, so I'd shoot a question in there. The other thing I noticed was the pauses. I didn't like the silences in our conversation. And it's not for the reasons you probably think. It's not because I was uncomfortable in the silence. It was because I felt like I was the expert here. And with the expert here, there shouldn't be any silences. Our conversation should just flow. And so when I hit these silence periods, I'd shoot a question in there. But I noticed something. I noticed that people are very polite. When I asked a question, they answered me. And then if I asked another question, they answer me again. And so instead of being a companion in their pit, a companion in the darkness, no, I was driving this conversation. And the other thing I noticed was this. It seemed like people felt like they were being interrogated by me. They've invited me into this very special part of their life, and here I am shooting questions at them. And so what I noticed was when I asked questions, in the pit, the conversations were short. People got fed up with it pretty quickly and ended the conversation pretty quickly. And I found that the better I was able to contain my questioning in the pit conversations, in the pastoral conversation, the conversations got longer and deeper. And that was hardest for me. But what's hardest for the people I train? Well, invariably, what's hardest for the people I train is to stop them from trying to solve or fix or make better the situation of the person that's talking to them. You see, the sort of people that come into my world, the people who want to become chaplains or they want to volunteer their time in hospitals, they've got big hearts. They want to help people. And so, what they want to do is they want to be able to make this better. And so they'll want to shoot a platitude in, or they'll shoot a suggestion or a Bible passage, all in an attempt to make this better. But it just doesn't. It just doesn't work. In videos that I'm going to be bringing in the future, I'll go into more detail how trying to solve, trying to offer fixes, how that just sabotages the very thing we're trying to do, which is connect with another person. But just before I go, What I want to make very clear to you is this, that at least 90% of the patients I visit in the hospital, the conversation starts off on a social level. I mean, I'm just a stranger. I've just arrived at their bed. I've introduced myself. Yes, they've asked me to sit down and we start talking. And so they're really testing me. They're trying to find out if I'm a human being or not. Okay. And then within 5 or 10 minutes of starting this conversation, then there's this potential for them to ask me into their world. And how do they do that? They do it by shifting the conversation from a social setting into a pastoral setting. Now I'm going to give you an example. Let's say I'm speaking with a lady. She's been talking to me about her passion, which was roses. And of course, it's a social conversation. So I'm going to be asking lots of questions. I want to know, what is it about roses? What do you love most? Is there a best place to plant them? Do they like full sun or part shade? What sort of soil do they like? And when it comes to fertilizing them, what's the best fertilizer? And of course, I want to protect them. So, what have you found works best to keep pests away from the roses? And when you come to prune them, how hard should you prune them? You see, I'm going to ask all those questions, and this person will be enjoying it because it's their passion. But then they shift the conversation. For example, the person I'm speaking to says, well, that was all before. I used to think that roses captured all the beauty in the world. But since the loss of my husband, the loss of Jim, it seems like my love for just about everything's gone, including my love of roses. You see, I was engaging with that person in a very social conversation about something they were passionate about, their roses, and then they shifted the conversation. They shifted it by bringing up something they didn't need to. That she brought up the death of her husband. Now, when that shift takes place, the shift has to take place inside of me. Now I've got to contain my questioning. I've got to contain my curiosity. I've got to contain my shared experiences. I've got to contain my advice, my solutions, my fixes, my silver linings, my platitudes. I've got to contain all that. And I go into listening and responding in a way that she believes that I understand, or I'm striving to understand what the impact of losing her husband has meant to this woman. That's what the pastoral conversation is. And as I said, yeah, it's simple on paper, but I tell you, in practice, it's really challenging. It's really challenging to contain all of those elements that we would normally use in a conversation. So, why have I decided with my second video to give you the heart of what it is that I do, the heart of what I hope you'll do? Because I want you to get practicing. Okay. And as I say to my volunteers in the hospital, you can have meaningful conversations outside the hospital. You can have meaningful conversations every day. So start practicing. Start practicing containing those other elements. As soon as a conversation shifts, you shift. And I want you to let me know how difficult it is. Please post some comments because, like I said, I struggle with some stuff. The people I've trained before, they struggle with their stuff. Okay. And at least in these early days, when there's only a few people watching these videos, I'll respond. I'll respond to your comments, or I'll post a video that is a direct response to your comments. Now, as I said, this is the meat and potatoes of what I do every day. I will be bringing you other videos which will add detail to the pastoral conversation and to help you master the elements of the pastoral conversation. Well, that's it. Thank you, guys. I appreciate your time. I have offered you something valuable in return for your valuable time. If there's something here that you think is valuable, please share it with the people you love so we can start getting people to engage like this with others, especially when they're grieving or they've brought up loss or they've brought up some suffering, that we just don't try and do what we normally do, try and fix it. Remember, these things can't be fixed, but they can be heard and understood, and that's powerful. Thanks again. I look forward to seeing you at my next video. God bless.